Welcome. So today, what we'll be doing is taking the finite element method a little bit forward, just to clarify what are the fundamentals. We saw some example yesterday. We'll see how things are generally done in also a structural analysis. So as we were discussing, uh, finite element can be used in various fields. So we'll be discussing those as well. And if time permits, what we'll do is we'll do a demonstration on phase 2, because apparently something is an issue with license of ANSYS. So I'll sort that out next time. So let's begin then. Good afternoon, everyone. So last time, what we were doing was we started about finite element analysis, and we saw some of the fundamentals of finite element analysis. So we saw what are the finite elements, what are nodes, what are elements, right? We saw how the basic type of calculation can be done, or an idea of what are the governing equations, what is the difference between governing equation and basis equation, how basis equation is used in interpolation work, and how what are the major differences between this method and other methods like the previously used methods that we discussed. Today we'll be moving ahead with these fundamentals to see an example also of a structural mechanics. So structural mechanics basically involves what we do. In terms of structural mechanics, we deal with how a material moves, how a material behaves in against any forces, against any stresses, or against any other impetus that is given. So what kind of movement it is there, how the body behaves, any deformation is there based on its properties, or any additional stresses it is forming. So how is it failing, or what are the critical strain, and so on, so forth. So structural mechanics deal with the structure part of it, or the material nature of any substance. So that will be defined by structural equations that are applicable for that case. So for our case, like in our rock slope technology, we saw that some of the governing equations include Moore Coulomb failure criteria, Hooke and Brown failure criteria, and so on. That defines what is the relation between the strength and the stress, right? And also there are certain equations that defines what is the what is the relation between force and movement, right? So amount of force that is exerted can be translated into motion. Uh, so that we'll be discussing with some example, and we'll also be seeing uh, some demo if possible in phase. So this one software yesterday we had some exposure, but very quickly I went through. So today we'll be doing it properly, if time permits. That is. So let's start. So yesterday we saw this. We saw how if we give some boundary conditions to a sample, right? And we want to calculate individual values of how or temperature or the heat transfers from one point to another, how it was being governed or calculated by its governing equation. In this case, it was the heat transfer equation. And every node, when it is calculated at every node, and between nodes, each of these values will be interpolated based on certain basis functions. and that was the basis function for this kind of analysis. There can be different types of basis functions and so on, right? So overall, what we understand is that finite element analysis is based on basically three zones. So like the first zone or the first stage is the pre-processing stage. Pre-processing stage, what it requires us to define the geometry, what kind of geometry it is. Like we defined it for, like we used to define a slope sort of geometry in two-dimensional figure. We can define a three-dimensional figure. We can basically imitate what practical it is. So most of the high-end simulations that are conducted, they are based on three-dimensional geometry that these days. So suppose a three-dimensional dump slope stability is there, uh, or uh, or for example, in ventilation simulations, a full three-dimensional underground gallery system is given. So that is a geometry, right? Material definitions, what kind of material is being used. So if we are talking about, suppose, ventilation simulation, so in that we have our wall, right? Wall is made of made out of the gallery wall is made will be made out of rocks or our coal or any other material that we are excavating, right? Then the main thing that we are looking for is air, or whatever we are simulating as air, like we can have gas or maybe even any fluid that in that case, and we have to give its properties. So when we talk about these kind of fluid dynamics, we have to talk about its fluid properties, like what is its viscosity, what is its conductivity, and so on, right? And also the friction that that mm, uh, and that the walls will exert on the motion of the gases, or if there is any bend or difference in the geometry, how it will change. So all these things will be defined in kind of what are the properties of that material. So different kind of material, wherever they are used differently, their material properties will be defined as per the system of processing we are trying to use. So for a structural, we generally go for its properties like Young's modulus, right? Poisson's ratio, cohesion, friction, tensile strength. In case we want it to be plastic, we go for its residual tensile strength or residual friction angle. So these residual, basically what they mean is when the failure has happened, like it has passed its peak strength. So failure can happen in many ways, right? It can be a brittle failure, like glass breaks and it stops taking any load further. It can be a plastic sort of failure where some load is taken. So that residual kind of behavior generally gives us better results in terms of how the actual field behaves, because mostly glass type of failure or brittle failure we don't see in practical fields. We see a sort of a plastic sort of behavior that even after the actual movement had started, it still has some load bearing capacity. It still has some friction that is in that case, in the sliding case, it is kinetic friction, and so on. So many residual properties are there. Even residual elastic modulus is there. Residual modulus, I mean, is there, that dictates how, with what respect the movement will be with respect to increase in stress and so on. So material properties are defined as per case-to-case basis. Discretization and meshing, we saw how in the last time we basically divided our material into various segments, and those segments were interconnected with each other using meshes. So wherever these meshes intersect, these become nodes, and anything between the nodes, the area encapsulating these nodes, are called elements. We saw that. And nodes and elements, discretization and meshing, that's the part. Uh, Then comes the boundary condition and loading condition. Again, same thing we saw how we have to give the initial conditions if there is a suppose a slope, it has to be given that how much where it is allowed to be stable on which side, like on the base it has no movement in xy direction, right? On the side of the slope where the opposite to the slope face is there, that side the slope will not have any y direction movement, because we are basically taking a cross section, right? And in other sense, like in our heat transfer case, the boundary condition was that the sides are insulated so that the heat transfer doesn't take place. In ventilation simulation, the boundary condition can be that such and such amount of friction is there with this boundary with this material, or the boundary condition can be initial pressure that a fan exerts, right? That this much amount of pressure is exerted from this fan, that can be a boundary condition, and the starting from that pressure and volume can be calculated at any other place, right? So boundary condition can be different in different cases, that we will keep on studying. So these were the pre-processing stuff. Then comes the main analysis part, and that we also saw yesterday. We saw how the each node has each node gets a solution based on the governing equation. So we were seeing how each of these nodes that were there. So all the calculation were based on these nodes. Another important concepts to understand is that we cannot, and it will be like physically impossible to actually calculate at each and every point of that geometry, because there will be infinite amount of points, and then calculations become very, very tough for getting our data for each and every point. So that's the whole purpose of meshing, so that we define which points we want to calculate our values. Like for example, in slope stability analysis, we will go for displacement measurement, how much displacement is there at each of these nodes, right? And on the basis of that, we'll have, like suppose values at each of these nodes, and on the basis of these values we will go for the next step in analysis, that is interpolation of results in elements. And yesterday we were seeing how basis functions are responsible for that. So defining the basis function is not in our scope, because that's a complex process based on what kind of geometry is there or what kind of mechanics we are using. So structural mechanics has different basis functions. Fluid dynamics has different basis functions, and so on. So interpolation can be done in different ways based on what are the governing equations, what is the system that we are using, and so on. Other analysis, like yesterday we couldn't, but we'll be seeing how some analysis like a strength reduction factor is there. So we reduce strength at every step and find out what is the effect of reducing that strength at each step. So that is an strength reduction analysis. There can be analysis for something like a sensitivity analysis, where the properties are being changed at a divided intervals, like increasing the cohesion, increasing the friction, and so on. And there can be many more analysis that can be done. We'll be seeing some of them. And the next part to that will be a post-processing, where these values that are there that will be used to form visual implications, like contour maps, or something like animations can be made out of that. And the actual values that are useful for us, what are the factor of safety or the strength reduction factor in our case, or what are the stress distribution, how the stresses are developing at any regular phases, and so on. So many things can be basically found out in terms of values, in terms of visuals, pictures, and so on, and in post-processing. So post-processing is basically, again, dependent on what kind of software we are using. So finite element analysis, when we talk about it, finite element analysis is a concept. So with this, we have to understand that when we talk about finite element analysis, it doesn't mean we are talking about any software, because and many software use finite element analysis, but they use it in very many different ways. The concept of finite element analysis is basically it divides the whole geometry into segments, right? The nodes and elements, and the calculations are done on each of these nodes based on the governing equations, boundary conditions, and the interpolation is done based on basis functions. That's the whole idea behind finite element analysis. What you have to do with that idea, that is totally up to what a programmer can program, right? So I can write a simple C++ code or MATLAB code to just input some geometrical coordinates, right? Divide it into some discretization in meshes. I can find the location of these meshes, and I can find out the values and interpolate based on my basis function. That I can do all in one code and just give out the values. That is also a big finite element analysis. These softwares, they use visuals, they use graphics to do that. So like the software we will be using, phase 2 and ANSYS, so they are also based on a full in case of ANSYS, they have a full CAD setup, like this computer aided design, like AutoCAD we have. Similar to that in ANSYS, there is a geometrical setup for CAD, so we can design 3D designs almost quite identical to what we do in AutoCAD, and there we can give details. Then the analysis is done on the back end, and the visualization. So visualization is very specific to what software we are using. What you do with your data that is processed from the analysis is up to the user or the programmer in this case. So generally what we want to see is how the stress is distributed, how the displacement is happening, uh, how the strain is developed, and so on. But there can be many more visualizations that can happen. Like in terms of computational fluid dynamics, we also want to see how the movement of the material is there, like flow, how the flow is happening, right? So that requires some more skills of data processing, like animating the data for each and every frame. So that requires a time-centric analysis. So analysis, the data that we get from the analysis, that data basically is up to us to how to represent it, how to visualize it, how to present it basically as final. So when we talk about finite element analysis, all these are part of it, but the processing part is only the part that is conceptually finite element. Basically, breaking of the geometry, calculating at nodes, interpolating. So do remember that. So that's why, as an engineer, we understand which softwares do what, but the core understanding of finite element goes ahead of that and understands what's the physical significance of a finite element analysis, right? So do remember that when we do use software, so we have to understand what's going on, and it's not the visualizations or the pre-processing geometry interface or anything, but how the basically the program is solving that. That's the more important thing. Okay, too much in this. Let's move on. Let's see one example. So in this example, what it is uh, this the cuboidal shape is there with a center hole in this, and in the center hole, basically this is some replication of a simple component from uh, that jack setup, which we use uh, in our lathe machines, right? So in lathe machines, this is a chuck that goes through this, and this is like a central setup. So what they want to do in this analysis is basically what it is, that it is fixed generally at one end, and there is a pulling force that is there due to the movement of the machinery and all, and they want to see that how the stresses are developed in this portion, the circular portion, the whole portion in that, and if there is any displacement due to this that can change its shape and all. So what they did was they started with the geometry. They designed it. That's very easy in ANSYS, the 3D or AutoCAD or any software that you want to use. Basically, make a rectangle, make a circle, and extrude this material. So it basically makes this kind of simple geometry. Then they did the discretization and meshing. So they discretized it into this cubical and cuboidal shapes. The thing to note is that you see how the type of discretization and meshing changes when they reach the center part. So if I zoom, even though on the outer sides it is quite regular, the mesh is quite regular, but as it reaches the center, it has to change its type of meshing, because the center geometry is circular. And that's why if you see these elements, and if what can we discuss, these elements inside are basically uh, these are second degree elements, because these are curved elements in this part. So and the elements that are touching this center tap circle, these will be second order elements, while the others may be only on the first order three-dimensional elements. So generally software does this automatically, but sometimes what happens is there is a requirement of some refining that is there. So sometimes uh, it automatically doesn't do it. It just goes to the first element only or first order only. And there is some gap that is basically left when a non-curved portion, when a non-curved mesh is superimposed on a curved portion. So that is also it's based on what kind of software you're using. So in case our software does not do that, it doesn't cater to the curved surface and doesn't change its type of mesh, we may have to use some other methods that are called mesh refining. So mesh refining is a total independent field where we have to alter the meshes to basically suit our geometrical requirements and suit our analysis requirements. So it's obvious that more number of elements will be better, but as we discussed before also, more number of elements will also mean more heavy calculation or heavy load on the our calculation setup or the system or whichever computer we are using. So that takes more time, that takes more resources and computation. So if not required, we generally avoid it. But if it is required, we have to anyways do that to find the accurate results, because generally the kind of increase if you say if this is the number of elements uh, in a mesh, right? And this is the accuracy. It is something on the lines of this. So basically, it plateaus at the maximum limit, whichever is the maximum limit here. But there is a part where there is a steep increase. Our work when we do refining of mesh is to reach this point, because any ahead any time we go ahead, basically the output that we are getting, the increase in accuracy is not sufficient enough uh, to basically justify how much processing power we have to invest in that. So generally, when these kind of meshing optimizations are done for bigger projects, more like more into the bigger projects, we do this accuracy versus element analysis and see how the things are changing. So whenever the accuracy in results it stops increasing substantially, we stop increasing the amount of meshing or amount of elements. Anyways, moving ahead, this was the pre-processing part where geometry and meshing was done. And then they defined the boundary condition. So boundary condition, what was it? Was at this edge, on this point, this was basically fixed. So this was the fixing of basically any end in a structural analysis. Because we are doing a structural analysis here, it means that the displacement in any of the direction, x direction, y direction, z direction, all are zero. So dx, dy, dz, right, all will be zero at this point if anything is fixed. It can be a case where we can allow certain motion in certain directions, like a roller kind of scenario. So roller, basically, if there is a roller arrangement here, it can allow like x direction or y direction motion, but again, it won't allow z direction motion. So these kind of boundary conditions we can give. All other are free boundaries because they will contract and move with respect to whatever force is there. So on this phase, it is defined that some force is being acted, right? And there will be some value of force that will be there. So this kind of analysis, very simple analysis we do in finite element to see what happens. And the analysis basis is basically on the basis of something called the stress matrix. So this can be if you see each element, uh, uh, if uh, if we see just one element of the mesh and see it in 2 dimension, uh, and we assume that this is the direction of the force that we are acting on. So each element will be defined by a certain thing called a stress matrix. So this will be sort of a governing equation to it. How we reach this equation is something we need to also understand. So I think I have the derivation here. Yeah. So what the situation is? So let us assume this is a single element, and this is the ith node. These the ends are the nodes, right? So this is the ith node, and this is the jth node, right? And the force that is acting at this point is Fi. The force that is acting on this side is Fj. Area of the element is A. Length is L. And the elastic modulus is E. Now, right now we are just talking about elastic modulus, though there are many things else that define this stress matrix. But just to start it off, so stress matrix, or in this case, we start with the stiffness equation. So we all know, right, that for any spring kind of situation, if we have a force, right, uh, and this is and the change that is there with respect to this force will be the x, and that will be defined by this equation, right? F equals to Ks, where K is the spring constant. This is also called a stiffness constant, and this kind of equation, the F equals to Kx, where F is directly proportional to the change in length, or dl in our case, is called the stiffness matrix or the stiffness equation. So for structural analysis, we go for these kind of stiffness parameters. For our, it will be something on this line. How we reach here, we will see. So uh, let me just remove this. Right. So stiffness matrix, we can say in this case. So for our case, if we suppose this is the force and area is A, so stress can be defined as force upon area, right? Strain can be defined as change in length over original length. This is, I think, very basic. So if we give a relation for elastic modulus, so elastic will be stress over strain. So FL into if L by ADL, right? If we just put these values here. And in this case, we can transform this whole equation in F equals to Kx format, basically by rearranging these, and something like this equation turns up. F equals to A area, right? E is elastic modulus, D is change in length, L is the original length, right? And basically, if we couple this constants up, because area and length are the properties of meshing, right? So A and L are constants. E is again a material property, so that is also constant. So dl is change in length. So if we see, this is basically transforming into F equals to KdL, right? Now, if we consider both of these forces, so if we say that on the I side, there is the displacement is dli, okay? And on the J side, if the displacement is dlj, so the total displacement or the total change in length, main change in length, the dl will be basically dli minus dlj, right? If we are seeing in this direction. So if I say this at J, there is dj, dlj, and I there is dij. So total expansion will be dli minus dlj, right? So do remember that. And then if we substitute it here, change in length. So and due to the force Fi, so Fi will be dli minus dlj into the k part, that is a constant, right? And by the equilibrium portion, Fi will be minus Fj, because if we are assuming that it is at equilibrium, the total sum of force will be 0. So Fi plus Fj is equals to 0. So that gives us Fi equals to minus Fj. So basically it gives Fj is minus dli minus dlj into k, the same equation with a minus sign. If this is transformed to a matrix form, so it will be something like Fi, right, and Fj, and it will be something on the lines of dli k and minus dlj k, right? And this will be minus dli k plus dlj k, right? And if you see, this is very similar to this equation with product multiplication. If we say, so Fi in this case will be k into dli, right? That is here, and minus k into dlj, that is here, and Fj equals to minus k dli and plus k dlj. So these two are this is an example how we get a stiffness matrix. So F equals to k into x is something that we say are the governing equations for the for our case of this kind of analysis, structural analysis. Now, Fi and J, we are talking in one dimension right now. We can have 4 dimensions, 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. So there will be similar increase in like 6 or 7, 2 to 4 to 6, right? So in 3 dimension, there will be 6 forces. And this also, the matrix, this one will transform to a 6 by 6 matrix. And this one will be a 6 by 2 matrix, 6 by 1 matrix, again same here. So for 3 dimension, similarly it will change, but the concept remains that the governing equations will be something on these lines, right? I hope this till now it is clear how we reach this stiffness matrix in terms of our structural analysis, right? Any questions? Oh, okay. So that's the whole concept behind the analysis part. Now, based on these analysis, again, as I said, they calculate for each of the metric at each of the vertices, they calculate, and on the basis function, they calculate the element. And yeah, so this is the kind of visuals that can come up. So basically, if you see, each of these elements will be having the results that are interpolated by each of these vertices or nodes. So each of these nodes have some values, and these will be interpolated in using basis functions. कौन सा कलर लूँ मैं? Blue is visible. Let's try this. Or I think yellow will be much more visible. Yeah, ठीक है. We'll use yellow then. Okay. Uh-huh. So if you can see from the first figure, basically it is demonstrating a stress distribution. And in stress distribution, what the purpose of the whole simulation was, how the stresses and displacement is happening on the inside of these this notch. And you can see how the because of this less area, cross-sectional area, the high stress development is there on this notch section as well because of the pulling force that was there. In terms of displacement, we can see that this side is not displaced at all. You can assume it is very low, while this side will have a cumulative high displacement. But there will also be an obliqueness of this notch due to the contraction in this side and expansion in this side. So all this can be actually analyzed based on the results that we get, right? And as I was saying, even though the nodes and the elements are visible here and the calculation was only done for the nodes, you can also see how the contours are formed irrespective of the position of the nodes, right? So these kind of interpolations are heavy side interpolations based on what kind of basis functions are responsible in this case. In structural also, major basis functions are generally linear. Cross linear interpolation it's called. So in cross linear interpolation, what happens is यार वो रबड़ क्यों आ जाती है? Is like if we have node 1 here, node 2 here, node 3 here, and so on. So the values in between will be cross linear. Cross linear means if this is 0 and this is 1, so the effect of the value of 0 of n1 and the effect of the value of n2 on anything in between this area will be defined by these cross linear lines. So generally this kind of is also followed in a structural analysis, as was seen in heat transfer, but it will not be every time. It may be curved also, it can be other also, but most of the structural analysis basis function is something like that. So if this is this point is n1 and this is n2, the relationship that will be seen will be on the basis of this only. So the numerical value of whatever we are analyzing here, it is stress, here it is displacement. So each of those can be calculated. Okay. So I think this was there. Yeah. So this was for many like finite element processing, how the different stages are there for pre-processing, analysis, and post-processing for a structural example that we saw. Now, as I was talking about the mesh refinement, so I wanted to give you guys an example. So if you see, if you take a circular geometry, right? And we have linear elements only if we have only linear 1 degree lines allowed or 1 degree meshing allowed. So what we can have is something like if we have triangular meshing, we can have something like this. a quadrilateral meshing or a square meshing, or in that sense, we have a hexagonal meshing, octagonal meshing, and so on. So as you see, if we keep on increasing, it will be reaching higher amounts of representative accuracy in terms of this kind of geometry. Linear geometries are easy to conform with linear elements or the linear 1 degree mesh elements. But when curvilinear geometries are there, then linear elements or 1 degree elements are a problem. So that's why we have to basically keep on decreasing the distance between the nodes, or we have to, in other words, we have to keep on increasing the number of elements in order to match the geometry as much as possible. So for example, if we have this example I got from the internet, that they were basically simulating a T pipe, the T junction that is there, right? And what they wanted to do was to mesh this cross section of the bent cross section. And they had a few ways. So they started with this 2 element mesh along the radius, and saw how the gap is being formed. Then they increased the elements to 4, then 8, then 16. And then you can see, even by linear elemental meshing or 1 degree elemental meshing, we can reach sufficient degree of accuracy. However, uh, with respect to accuracy, we also lose processing time and all, because now from 2 we have basically increased to 16 to get some good accurate values. And as I was previously, I was also said, the accuracy and number of elements will be related to the this plot only. So if number of elements is on the x-axis and accuracy is on the y, so there will be a point where it will start plateauing and reaching the maximum accuracy part. And we cannot actually wait every time for it to reach the maximum accuracy in terms of if we keep on restricting ourselves to 1 degree linear meshing, right? uh, Reason is, again, suppose this was like a 2 element. In this case it was 4 here, 6 here, 8 here, and so on, and we reached 16 somewhere here. So the amount of nodes also correspondingly increased, right? So for each element addition, we are basically adding, if in 2 dimensional we are adding 4 nodes, and for 3 dimension it is what, 6, no, 8 nodes, and so on. So in this kind of increase basically starts putting more and more processing time. And processing time is important, as when you will be starting our simulation part, you will be seeing that how the processing time changes with respect to uh, just a small increase in or decrease in the number of or the distance between each mesh element. So each mesh element, if we change from suppose 1 meter distance to 0.8 meter distance, also the corresponding number of increase in elements and nodes will also reflect on the processing time. So we'll do some modeling and we'll see how these things change, and we'll also see if we can have a plot like this by iterating number of elements and seeing how these things change in later classes. Okay, I think for the theory part, this is it. If any questions are there, we can stop here right now and we can take some questions. What I actually planned was to start the phase, but right now it's 3 o'clock, right? Okay, we'll see. Yes, any questions till now? Whatever has been taught today, or any previous previous tutorials, previous lectures. You can have it. So what I am thinking is,
Hello,
okay.
sir.
Yeah, Pandab.
Sir, you told that the amount of missing and accuracy, the last term.
Yeah.
So after some time, the accuracy will be certain.
Yeah, the accuracy will not increase after a certain amount of time.
So sir,
Not substantially.
how we can know that optimization missing?
Yeah. So meshing optimization is also a full field of work in when we do finite element. Sometimes what happens is there are two. See, you understand that why we are doing it, right? We are trying to match the geometry.
Yes, sir.
Right. And what happens in meshing optimization is there are different algorithms that are followed. Like, for example, if we are restricting here with 1 degree linear elements, right? So we are not going for curvilinear elements. In that case, we have to have a certain number above which the substantial increase in the results is not there. So what happens when suppose like these are the 5 cases. Let's assume this is the case 1, 2 element, 4 element, 8 element, and 16 element, right? And the user, or in our case, the software will do that. It wants to find out where to stop now increasing. So what it will do is general. I'm giving a very gross idea of how things are done. So uh, what can be done is it starts processing and finding out, suppose, the stress value in each case here, just for example, right? And when it starts increasing the number of elements from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 and so on, it starts plotting these elements and seeing how the values are changing. When it sees that with the number of elements increasing, the value changes, the amount of value that is changing is becoming less and less, and up to a threshold. Basically, in optimization exercise, we decide a threshold that, okay, this is the threshold beyond which, if below which, if there is less decrease than this amount, so you can assume that it is optimized. So that optimization threshold, if it is reached, that suppose after uh, this point, the increase with 2, like we are increasing from 6 to 8, 8 to 10, and so on. So the increase with two number of elements is less than suppose 0.002. Just assume that. So if that threshold is there, so our optimization exercise will stop. Okay, whatever the number of elements were there, this is the optimum way of meshing. Second condition can be basically to change these elements from linear to curvilinear, or from 1 degree to 2 degree, and so on. That becomes easier, but the problem with that is, for any curve, when you design any curve, right? For any straight line or a linear portion, you just have to define 2 points, correct? For
Yes.
any curve, you have to have at least 3 points or more, right? For defining that curve. If you are familiar with any CAD software also, if you subtend an arc, it will basically ask you the end point, the start point, and some midpoint. At least these 3 points it will ask for that software to try and replicate that arc, right? So as the complexity will increase, suppose this is just a U, this is just a L way. If there is a geometry that has a U in that, or a U shape in that, so our element will again change in that way. So as the complexity will increase, the number of nodes again keep on increasing, right? So that balance also has to be taken care of. And when we do the optimization exercise, suppose in ANSYS, when we do this meshing optimization, we can give it an option for increasing the order of mesh. So that can be done. Prabhupada says sometimes manual meshing is also needed. Yes, manual meshing is needed when we, as I said, we have to correct these errors. So like what he is doing right now in this exercise is basically he is increasing the meshing here only at this region. It is not a universal increase, right? So manual meshing is basically done when a regular mesh or a global meshing condition is not fulfilled. So suppose like in our previous examples, uh, so much, yeah. So in this case, what we were seeing was that a regular meshing is first done, right? But if we want to change the meshing here only in this region, or we have to increase the amount of meshing that is to be done, like we want to increase the mesh density, or we want to suppose just change this area into non-linear elements. So many permutations, combinations can be done, right? So that's when we do manual meshing. And manual meshing, most of the time we have to. In not even in basic softwares, but even complex exercise. It's most of the time we have to do manual meshing because general algorithms of software is based on performance optimization. So based on what kind of geometry it has and what will give it as quickest result, generally those softwares are designed in algorithm is designed in that way. So that mesh is designed to give an performance optimization of quick results. But many times we don't need that. We need accurate results, right? So we have to, yes. So Prabhupada, what you say is correct. Manual meshing will be required at many places, and that's what is one part of optimization of meshing is that only. So we do that optimization study, or we can try and keep on changing and seeing the results, how they change and so on. Prabhupada, Pandav, is that does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. That was about some fundamentals of finite element. So let's stop here. Tomorrow, anyways, we are having lab class. So what will we do tomorrow is we'll start the phase software. Yesterday we got a glimpse of it, but tomorrow we'll start it fully. Tomorrow I'll demonstrate some of these, some of the capabilities, what we can do in phase, what kind of finite element analysis can be done, right? We'll have two or three types of exercises that we'll do in that. And then what I will be doing is I will be giving you some, maybe I'll give you the software crack version if that is possible. So let me check if I have that. I think I have the crack for the older version, so I will give you that. So similar to what we did, our exercise we did for LEM, right? In this also, in this software also, the phase software, we will have dedicated tutorials that will help us learn this software quickly. Just the basics at least, so we'll do that. Also, guys, again, I will remind you that as per some of the meetings that are happening, and because COVID cases are increasing day to day, we might have to have regular class tests, and that may be actual assessment for you for this course. Like there may be a case where there is no end sem or mid sem or something like that. So whatever the class tests will be there, evaluation will be the basis for your, will be the final evaluation basically. So keep revising. And what I'm planning now is because we have already like 2 modules, we have covered 2 or 3 modules in both of these courses. So what I will do is I'll plan segmented class tests. So like for example, in computer applications, we will have a test that is just based on first test that will be based on flowcharts and algorithms. Second will be based on suppose limit equilibrium. Third will be based on finite element and so on, something like that. Okay, and whatever we will be learning, we'll keep on having some regular once in 2 weeks or something like that. We'll have tests so that at least the assessment is done. Otherwise, later on it will be a tough task. So that's why I'm saying whatever you do, keep on revising, keep downloading these videos and seeing them, keep making notes. Very important because without notes, most of the things can be missed. So do that. So let's stop here. Any questions are there? Still, we have like 4 minutes are there, so we can have those. But yeah, that's it from my side for now. Any questions? You're welcome. Right. So if no questions are there, we'll stop the class here. You can have some free minutes before your next class. Pandav, do stay back. We'll have a chat. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you again. Keep revising. Keep yourself safe. Keep everyone else with you safe. Okay.
So